Hi, it's Richard here from Intelligent Advisor IT Consulting, and I'd like to thank you for joining us for this chapter in our online training about decision services. This chapter is all about live mode, what it represents, what it helps you do, as well as we'll look at how you can get the most out of it by understanding the different icons and images. Plus, we'll show you a great tip for getting more experience with decision services in general. And in our demonstration, we'll show you how to use one of these decision services in live mode. Let's take a look at the agenda. We're going to start with an overview of what live mode actually is, and we'll try and bring it into focus compared to Oracle policy modeling, as we always do. Then we'll look at using live mode itself, how we can go about setting values in live mode, how we can view the results, inferred values, and we'll talk about saving and reloading data used in live mode. In the demo, we will show you how to use live mode in a real-life situation. So here's an introduction to live mode. It is roughly equivalent to the debugger in Oracle policy modeling. The principles are the same. It does, however, have a number of specifics that make it slightly different. The focus of live mode is the rules and decisions, basically trying to understand whether the rules that you've written are giving you the results that you're expecting. We discussed earlier a similar feature called Run with Rest, which is in the menu. The focus of Run with Rest, although it's similar, is getting things to work from the point of view of a contract. Although, of course, Run with Rest does also allow you to check the results. It is more focused. It is easier to focus on whether the inputs and outputs are behaving themselves. Whereas live mode, you're seeing both the inputs, the outputs, and the intermediate values as well. A decision service is either in edit mode or live mode, or not both. We've seen, I think, sufficient demos now of me clicking the button to switch between edit mode and live mode to understand that that is the case. Just like the debugger, we can export and import scenarios. However, this time round, the format is JSON in common with everything else in decision services. One final note, if your rules have errors or you haven't quite finished your table yet, you can still go into live mode. All error fields will be replaced with null values, so you can at least get your live mode working and perhaps check on part of your rules. In Oracle policy modeling, there are a large number of example projects, and those of you who read our website will know that we're great fans of these projects. Just like Oracle policy modeling, decision services now have their own example projects. They can help you understand what you can use decision services for, and of course they are great learning tools. And in the demo that follows, we'll show you how to get them, and we'll show you how to use one of them to experiment with live mode. The link is in the slide, but of course it probably will change over time. I suggest just searching for decision services examples in the online help. So let's walk through what the live mode actually is. So if I click live mode, what do I get? I essentially get two panels. On the right, I have the rule panel or the rule view where I can see my tables, my paragraphs. And on the left, I have the data panel where I can see the outputs and the inputs. The data panel allows me to enter data in the inputs, for example. So if I'm required to enter various pieces of information to get my rules to work, that's where I'll do it. And I will see red highlighting and error messages if there are inputs that are missing. In the lower part of this data panel, you can see that there is an object called the person, and there are numbers 1, 2, and 3. So I've actually created 3 instances of the person for my live mode. And you can see underneath there's a button that says delete record to be able to delete any of the instances, and also a plus to be able to create new one. The rule panel on the right-hand side therefore displays the real live view, the live view of the execution of your rules. There are lots of different tool tips and other features that can be visualized when using the mouse. We're going to walk through the 4 key items about using the rule panel. Number 1, as we saw in the previous demo, the tooltips will reveal the inferred values, as well as, for that matter, the selected values in a table. So you can see in the example, the value of the result is 75, the value of the new result is null, and in the third element, the second table, you can see a small arrow which is telling us that something has been selected. Finally, there is a Boolean, and you can see that the Boolean is listed with a tooltip as being true. Table rows use this icon. The table row that has been selected by the rule will be highlighted in each table. So in this case, you can see that the start date has caused the second row of the table to be selected, where you can see my large red arrow. In the first table, you'll notice that it references show record 1 and 1 record. When we talk about objects, we'll begin to see that the live mode will, just like the Oracle Policy Modeling debugger, let me switch between instances of an entity to be able to view, for example, an entity level attribute that has been inferred. So at the moment, I'm seeing whether the person can buy alcohol, the person's car risk factor are the 2 conditions, and I have the output, the person's car is available. And I may have multiple persons, so I would be interested to find out what is the value for each of those persons. When dealing with Booleans, you will also see, such as the first 2 screenshots, check marks and crosses to indicate whether a Boolean is true. So we can see that in the first case, the person can buy alcohol and the person is not accompanied by a responsible adult. And in the second case, you'll see a round symbol looking like a disk, meaning for some of the instances of the object it is false, and some of the instances of the object it is true. So in summary, when working with multiple instances of an entity, the tooltip shows a summary, and the little ring indicates if there are multiple responses. And as I just mentioned a moment ago, in the live mode, if there are multiple records, I can select all the records, or I can select individual records to see the output. The left-hand data panel can, of course, be used to show results. So I can switch to output mode in the live panel on the left, and it gives perhaps a more properties-oriented list of outputs. Just like Oracle Policy Modeling, where we can export a scenario from the debugger, you can export and import scenarios out of and into live mode using the action menu in the data panel. Make sure you use the action menu on the left-hand side. Plus, there's also the reset option, which is very familiar to you if you use the Oracle Policy Modeling debugger, since it resets all the inputs to null so we can create a brand new session. That's because if you use the live mode and make changes, the live mode remembers data entered during the session, so you might want to reset and start again. So in summary, what have we seen? We've seen a basic overview of the live mode. We now understand that it's essentially a debugging tool. We've talked about using the data panel on the left-hand side to set values. And we've talked about using the rules panel or the rules view on the right-hand side to leverage the tooltips to view inferred values, but also the icons, for example, when dealing with Boolean values, to understand how the results can be interpreted. We've also seen that where multiple instances are available, we can switch between an individual instance and all instances. Finally, we've talked about the ability to export and import scenarios out of and into the live mode. In the demo that follows, we're going to show you all of those features, and we're going to show you where you can get a set of example decision services to accelerate your learning. So in this demonstration, we're going to be talking about live mode. Live mode is, of course, accessible when you enter a decision service and you click live mode. Your decision service is either in edit mode or in live mode. It can't be in both. When you're in live mode, your screen display breaks down into two well-defined areas. The rule area, or the rule view, where you can see your rules and you can potentially see tooltips and other icons that help you understand what is being executed. And secondly, you have the data view, the data tab, where you can enter input values and consult outputs if they've been defined. So I'm going to enter an input value, at which point you can see here in my example that the live mode, the table comes to life. We can see the tooltip showing me the first attribute's value. We can see the tooltip showing me the value of the output column, and we can see an icon demonstrating this row is activated. The table is not relevant because I haven't created any output. Let's take a look at a slightly more sophisticated example. I'm going to come out of that table and I'm going to show you a page in the online help that I mentioned in the presentation. Since 22A monthly release 1, the documentation has been updated to include a variety of decision services. So to begin with, I've downloaded this decision service, and in a few moments, I'm going to use a second decision service. So let's download this one as well. So how do we use these JSON files that have been provided? From the projects page, we click Actions and we click Import. Of course, if you don't have permission to do this, because your role perhaps is only that of an author, you won't be able to follow through. But I'll go to where I've saved my JSON files. So this is the first project and this is the second project. And this is a demonstration input for the live mode. So it's important to realize that the project itself is defined as a JSON file, and the live mode uses a JSON file as well. So I'll go ahead and import that project. I'll see the import project dialog with a very well done preview of what's in here, including the output and the input. I can choose the workspace according to the workspaces that I have permission to see, and I can rename the project if I wish. So I'm going to go ahead now and import this. So in this particular example, you can see that there are some Booleans and some tables and some inline comments. So let's go ahead and switch into live mode. So the rule view has come alive. You'll notice at the moment that because various attributes are null, so the outputs are null. On the input tab of the data area, I'm expected to introduce a couple of pieces of information. So I'm going to enter a transaction limit of 100. And I'm expected to introduce an account type. You will notice that there are no drop downs in the input and output area. So now I've selected a account type of transaction and I've set a transaction limit of 100. We can see that in the first Boolean, both conditions are false, and in the second, the same. In the table, we can see the selected line, and in the second table, we can see the selected line is down at the bottom. In this section, you will notice that the rule block refers to person's address, and it says there are no records. That's because in my live mode, I haven't added any records. So I'm going to add a row, and I will enter a country of Ghana. Now I have a selected row and it is listed as medium risk. I will add a second row and we will enter a value of Ireland, and we will scroll down and see that it's listed as low. Because there are now two instances of the object, there are various new tooltips. For example, it says some Ghana, some Ireland, some medium, some low, and it says all false because none of them are a high-risk country. Where it says all records, I can click and I can focus down on Ghana or Ireland for the purposes of debugging. Finally, if I wish to, I can export this scenario and reuse it at a later date. I'll come up to the top, and in the projects list, I will import the second example. Again, you will notice the clear preview. And I'll import this decision service. And I'll move into live mode. One input is required, the child's age. Say the child is aged 7 years. So in the health test required, there are 2 rows that have been activated, specifically a medical examination and a TB screening test. That's because in the output, there are 2 inferred tests. The first test is a medical examination, and the second test is the TB screening. Finally, I'll return to the top, return to my account risk assessment, go into live mode. Just to demonstrate, I will go to the left-hand side and import input values so that I can review a scenario, and if I wish, I can export the inputs and the outputs or reset. That's it for our demo. See you in the next chapter.